My wife's Olivia. Boss slipped his hand into my wife's skirt and said, "Leave. She's mine now, or face me. Manto Man." 10 minutes later, he couldn't walk, stand, or talk. I broke his bones, the lunch that should have been ordinary. I remember the day too clearly to ever forget it. My wife had finally agreed to meet me for lunch near her office. She'd been working late nights, often exhausted, trying to please a boss who demanded too much. She brushed it off, said that's just how corporate life is. But I knew something had been weighing on her, so I thought maybe lunch would help. Just the two of us. No deadlines, no stress, a chance to remind her that outside of office politics and promotions, she still had someone who loved her unconditionally. We met at a quiet bistro downtown, sunlight filtering through wide glass windows. She smiled when she saw me, but it was a tired smile. I reached across the table, touched her hand, and we laughed for a few moments about how awful my tie looked. For 20 minutes, it felt normal, calm, safe. Then he arrived. Bastian Drew, her boss, the kind of man who carried himself like he owned every room he walked into. Expensive watch, perfect hair, that predatory grin that made your skin crawl. He didn't notice me at first. He noticed her. His eyes locked on her like she was an object he had already purchased. The atmosphere shifted instantly. She stiffened, her fork trembling slightly in her hand. I leaned closer and whispered, "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Just eat." But I knew. I turned and saw him walking toward us. He didn't hesitate, didn't respect boundaries. He pulled out a chair at our table like he belonged there. "Kevin," he said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. I didn't realize this was a family outing. I didn't like the way he said my name as if I were disposable. My wife tried to interject. "Bastian, we're in the middle of..." But before she could finish, his hand slid onto her shoulder. And then, in a single movement, he leaned in close and let his hand trail down her side, fingers slipping beneath the hem of her skirt. "Leave," he said to me, smiling with cruel arrogance. "She's mine now." Or face me, Manto Man. The restaurant noise seemed to vanish. No clinking silverware, no chatter, just the sound of my heartbeat and my wife's sharp gasp as she pushed his hand away. The way he laughed like he owned her, like I was just an obstacle to be brushed aside, lit something inside me I didn't even know I had. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping across the floor. My wife's eyes widened, fear flickering in them. Not fear of him, but of what I might do. And in that instant, I realized something. This wasn't just a man crossing a line. This was a predator who thought he could humiliate me, humiliate her, and walk away untouched. He had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2. The Challenge. Outside, the air between us turned heavy. My wife's face was pale, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say, "Don't," but couldn't form the words. Bastian smirked, brushing off her shove like it was a joke. "Relax, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping arrogance. "Your husband knows how this works. Men like him always step aside when real men show up." The restaurant fell silent. People were staring. Some had their phones half raised, sensing drama. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Take your hand off her and walk away." He chuckled. "Or what? You'll sue me? Write a strongly worded letter? No, Kevin. If you want to prove yourself, step outside." Manto Man, he wanted an audience. He wanted to humiliate me publicly. But the truth was, he'd already crossed the line the second he touched her. There was no backing down. I nodded once. Outside. Then my wife grabbed my arm. "Kevin, please don't." I looked at her, then at him. "I have to." We stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, the restaurant crowd pressing against the windows. A few brave souls followed to the sidewalk, phones recording. Bastian loosened his tie like this was a performance, rolling his shoulders theatrically. "Last chance," he said, smirking. "Leave her, or I'll take her from you right here." That was it. That was the spark that lit the powder keg. He lunged first, swinging wild, expecting me to back down. But arrogance makes men sloppy. I blocked, pivoted, and drove my fist into his ribs. The crack was sharp, clean. He stumbled back, eyes wide, the smirk fading into something I'd been waiting to see all along. Fear. "Still want to play alpha?" I growled. He swung again, slower this time. I ducked, grabbed his arm, twisted hard until his shoulder popped. His scream cut through the air, drawing gasps from the crowd. 10 minutes. That's all it took. 10 minutes of strikes, locks, and calculated rage until Bastion drew. Mr. Untouchable, Mr. Power was a heap on the pavement. He couldn't stand, couldn't walk. His voice cracked as he tried to curse me, but all that came out was a broken groan. The crowd filmed everything. Every arrogant taunt, every desperate stumble, every bone that gave way under the weight of his own hubris. My wife stood frozen, tears in her eyes. Not of fear, but of release. I stood over him, chest heaving. "Touch her again," I said coldly, "and you'll lose more than bones." And then I walked back inside, leaving him writhing in the gutter with his reputation shattered and his body broken. Chapter 3. The Fallout. The police arrived faster than I expected. By then, Bastion was curled on the pavement, clutching his arm, his face twisted in rage and pain. A couple of bystanders were already giving statements to the officers, shoving their phones forward, replaying footage they just recorded. "Sir, step back," one officer ordered me. His hand hovered near his holster. I raised my palms slowly. I defended my wife. "Check the cameras behind me." My wife's voice shook. He put his hands on me in the restaurant. Everyone saw the officers exchange glances. This wasn't going to be a he said situation, not with half the restaurant as witnesses and security footage waiting inside. The hostess came outside, pointing at Bastion. He groped her, right in front of her husband. She told him to stop. A man with glasses added. He challenged him, said, "Leave. She's mine now." I heard it clear. The officers scribbled notes, their pens flying. One of them muttered, "Sounds like assault and harassment." For the first time, I saw Bastion's arrogance crack into desperation. He tried to speak. He attacked unprovoked, but nobody was buying it. Not with witnesses lined up, not with the cameras still rolling. I was taken in for questioning. "Standard procedure," they said. My wife came with me, hand trembling in mind the entire way. At the station, Detective Monroe slid a laptop across the table, replaying the bistro surveillance footage. There it was, his hand sliding up her thigh, his sneer, his challenge, and then me standing, fists clenched as the storm broke. Monroe closed the laptop with a snap. "Looks pretty clear to me. You protected your wife. We'll file the report accordingly. But understand, he's powerful, and powerful men push back. Be ready." I nodded, jaw tight. I'd been ready since the moment he touched her. News spreads faster than fire when there's blood in the air. By the time we left the station, clips of the fight had already gone viral. Hashtags like "the Alpha Boss down" and "Udidang stand with her" trended across social media. Employees from his company began leaking stories. Emails, complaints swept under the rug. Whispered rumors suddenly screaming into daylight. Women he'd cornered at parties. Assistants he'd touched too long. Meetings that ended with threats if they didn't cooperate. The company issued a sterile press release. "We take these allegations seriously and are launching an internal investigation." But it was too late. The internet had already judged. 3 nights later, I got a call from my lawyer. "They want to settle," he said, almost laughing. "Civil suit, hush money, the whole 9 yards. His team knows if this goes to trial, more skeletons tumble out. And trust me, he can't afford any more broken bones. Figuratively or literally." I leaned back in my chair, phone tight to my ear. "Tell them no. We don't want silence. We want the truth out." My wife, listening nearby, finally smiled through her tears. It wasn't the smile of relief. It was the smile of a woman watching a monster fall. Bastian Drew thought he was untouchable. That day on the sidewalk, I broke his bones. But now the world was breaking his legacy. Chapter 4. The Trial. Bastian Drew's lawyers came out swinging. Suits worth more than most people's yearly salary, polished shoes, voices smooth as honey. They painted me as a violent husband who lost control in public. But every time they spoke, the truth cut through their rehearsed performance. The prosecution rolled the restaurant surveillance footage on a giant courtroom screen. The jury leaned forward, watching in silence as Bastian's hand slid under my wife's skirt. Her gasp, her shove, his sneer, his words, "Leave. She's mine now, or face me man to man." The room went still. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The hostess testified first. He touched her. She told him to stop. Everyone saw it. The man with glasses followed. He provoked the fight. Said she was his. I've never seen anything like it. Each voice was another nail in the coffin of his defense. By the time 3 more patrons confirmed the same details, his lawyers looked like they were drowning. But the real blow came when the corporate investigation documents were admitted. Multiple complaints, HR records buried under resolved informally, assistants describing groping cornered meetings, veiled threats. One woman, tears in her eyes, whispered on the stand. I thought no one would believe me until I saw the video. The courtroom shifted. The jury didn't just see an arrogant man. They saw a predator who'd been enabled for years. When it was his turn to testify, Bastian tried to resurrect the swagger. He spoke of being misunderstood, of friendly gestures blown out of proportion. But then the prosecution played the recordings from the phones of bystanders. His tone, his arrogance, his words, "Leave, she's mine now," echoed through the room again. Whatever confidence he had crumbled, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty of sexual harassment, guilty of assault, and though the court stopped short of handing me a medal, the charges against me, excessive force, were dismissed. The judge's final words still ring in my ears. "Mr. Drew, the law is not your shield for predation. Actions have consequences. Today, you face yours." My wife wept quietly into my shoulder. Across the aisle, Bastian's once proud figure sagged. His empire of intimidation collapsed in that single word. Guilty. And for the first time, I saw him for what he really was. Not an alpha, not a boss, but a coward stripped bare before the world. Bastian Drew thought he could break me in public. Instead, the world broke him. Chapter 5. The Ruin. Bastian Drew's fall wasn't a crash. It was a free fall with no bottom in sight. The day after the verdict, his company issued a statement. Effective immediately, "Mr. Drew has been terminated. We do not tolerate misconduct." But everyone knew the truth. They'd tolerated it for years until he became a liability they couldn't hide. First went his job, then his reputation. Corporate sponsors pulled contracts. His speaking engagements gone. The glossy magazine that once plastered his face across a cover ran a follow-up. From alpha to outcast. The rise and fall of Bastian Drew. Investors abandoned him. Colleagues who once kissed his shoes now denied they'd ever known him. And the civil suits rolled in. One after another, women who had been silent for years suddenly had the courage to speak. Our lawsuit had cracked the dam, and now the flood poured through. The courtroom ordered him to pay damages to my wife. It wasn't just money, it was acknowledgement. An official stamp that said, "Yes, this happened. Yes, it was wrong. But our case was just the beginning." Each new lawsuit drained his accounts. The offshore assets he thought were safe were frozen under investigation. The man who once bragged about his penthouse, his imported car, his tailored suits, was forced to sell everything to cover mounting legal fees. By the end of the year, he wasn't living in luxury. He was renting a 1-bedroom apartment, dodging reporters, hiding behind sunglasses like a cornered animal. But perhaps the worst wound wasn't financial. It was social. The same men who once called him Alpha now laughed behind his back. The women he preyed on, finally free of fear, stood tall while he shrank into the shadows. His name had become poison. No one wanted to be seen with him. No one wanted to risk the stain of association. The world he once controlled turned its back. My wife and I walked through the aftermath with quiet dignity. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about healing. The nightmares eased. The tremor in her hands slowly faded. She began to smile again. Real smiles, the kind that crinkled her eyes and lit up the room. "One evening," she said softly, "you didn't just protect me that day. You gave me my voice back." And in that moment I realized the true victory wasn't breaking his bones. It was breaking his illusion of power. Bastian Drew had once told me, "She's mine now." But now the truth was undeniable. She was never his to take, and the only thing that truly belonged to him was ruin. Chapter 6. The Quiet Victory. Months passed. The noise of the trial and headlines faded into the background of the city's endless news cycle. New scandals took over. But for us, life slowly found a new rhythm. My wife no longer walked into her office carrying the weight of fear. Bastian Drew's name, once a daily reminder of intimidation, became nothing more than a bad memory whispered about in HR files and news archives. She transferred to another department, this time under a manager who respected her talent instead of exploiting her vulnerability. Watching her thrive again, watching her come home with laughter instead of tears, was the sweetest victory. I didn't emerge unscathed. The fight left its mark on me, not just in the ache of my hands or the caution in my step, but in my understanding of how fragile dignity can be. People stopped me sometimes at the grocery store, at the gas station. "Saw what you did," they'd whisper. "Good on you." But it wasn't pride that stayed with me. It was clarity. I hadn't just fought a man. I had stood against a predator who believed no one would ever stop him. And in doing so, I realized there comes a point where silence is complicity. I heard pieces of his downfall through the grapevine. The lawsuits dragged on. His fortune crumbled. Former allies refused to testify for him. His once feared voice was absent from every boardroom, every conference, every stage. The man who had declared himself alpha now existed in whispers of pity. His roar had been reduced to silence. One night, sitting by the fire, my wife asked me, "Do you regret it breaking him that way?" I thought about it long and hard. Then I shook my head. "I don't regret protecting you," I said, "and I don't regret ending his illusion that he could take whatever he wanted. Sometimes people like him only learn when they're forced to feel powerless." She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Then you taught him." It wasn't his broken bones that mattered in the end. It was the broken cycle, the end of his reign of intimidation. He would never grope another woman at a restaurant. He would never smirk his way out of accountability again. That was the real revenge. And as I held my wife's hand, warm and steady in mine, I understood something deeper. Justice isn't always handed down by courts. Sometimes it begins the moment you decide enough is enough. Epilogue. When power meets consequence. They say revenge is hollow, that breaking someone only leaves you empty. But they don't talk about the kind of revenge that isn't fueled by rage, but by necessity, by love, by dignity, by survival. Bastian Drew thought he was untouchable. He thought money, status, and arrogance made him a god. He thought my wife was just another possession he could claim, and I was just another man too afraid to fight back. But in 10 minutes, he learned the lesson he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Power without respect is paper thin. One strike, one fracture, and it crumbles. He lost everything: his career, his fortune, his reputation. His name, once a badge of intimidation, became a warning. His fall was the story others whispered about in boardrooms. Don't end up like him. He thought he broke women down. He thought he broke men with fear. But in the end, it was his own arrogance that broke him. We gained more than peace. We gained freedom. My wife no longer walks with her shoulders hunched, no longer flinches at shadows. She laughs again. She dreams again. She is no one's possession. And me, I carry the memory of that day like a scar, but not one I regret. It reminds me that love is not just about flowers and promises. It's about standing up when someone tries to rip away your family, your dignity, your humanity. Revenge isn't always about violence. Sometimes it's about taking the one thing your enemy values most and showing them they never deserved it. For Bastian, that was power. For us, it was freedom. And while his bones healed, his reputation never did. In the end, I didn't just break a man. I broke the illusion that he could own us, and that is a victory no one can ever take away. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe.